Today, we're getting a bit personal with a leader I greatly respect and admire, someone I've had the privilege of working closely with over the last several years and observing how his actions squarely align with his values. What stands out about Matt Murphy, chairman and CEO of Marvell Technology, is the way he thinks about leadership, not as status, but as obligation to his people, to the company, and to the industry that depends on Marvell's work. Leadership isn't just about strategy or execution. It's about judgment, responsibility, and living with the weight of decisions that affect thousands of people and countless downstream outcomes. Today, we're going to talk about the influences that shaped Matt, the moments that tested him, and the values he returns to when the stakes are high and the answers aren't obvious. Okay, Matt, thanks for joining me on A Bit Personal.
Thank you, Jodi. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, you can tell me the truth. No, I think that, it's always fun to spend a little bit of time talking to you, whether it's in a dive bar having a drink or at the F1 or a board meeting or in front of a camera. So I do appreciate the time.
Yeah, same here. It's going to be fun.
It will be. So no earnings, we don't have to talk about earnings, don't have to talk about product roadmaps, but the sort of personal story behind the public success. You'll probably want to talk about technology by the
Sure.
time we're done.
Very passionate about it, but we can talk about me a little bit too, especially in the context of Marvell. So.
Okay. All right. So I'm sort of curious. We'll start out easy. I'm curious that a CEO at your level, obviously your day begins way before you get to the office. Leadership begins before you get to the office. And you've heard the old saying by Admiral McRaven, I think it is, that if you want to change the world, start by making your bed.
Yep.
So what does an intentionally designed day look like for Matt Murphy? Do you start with making your bed, or is there some other ritual that gets you on a productive path for the rest of the day?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've seen McRaven speak. I totally agree with him. I think getting the fundamentals right early on is really important. And I think for me, probably my most productive days is in the morning, get up really early and exercise.
Okay.
That's like, if I can do that and basically get up, I'm talking about an ideal day, right? Well rested, get up between 5 and 5:30, get up, get a really good workout in, check emails, just kind of digest, deal with things that came in overnight. I'd probably do my best thinking as well. And then it seems like at some point, invariably, 8 o'clock or after, it's over. People are coming at you.
Okay.
There's things you got to go deal with. I've never been good at, hey, I'm just going to go try to get in a swim this afternoon, or I'm going to go run at lunch or something. It almost never works. So I think especially when I was training and working out more consistently, I think that was a key part of my program. I wouldn't say I'm great at it every day, but that for me is like the most quiet, calm period of time. And, I think in general, you just always feel a lot better after you get a workout in. And so that would be my ideal morning. Okay. Yeah, take care of the basics.
And do you wake up thinking about Marvell?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Literally.
I mean, you kind of reach over and first it's, I think, you got to look at, is there any, not triage, but, as a CEO, the problems tend to the bad problems, the tough problems come all the way up, right? I mean, I got a very, very strong leadership team at this company. We built a lot of bench strength. So they're incredible at running the company. So in some ways, the better we've done and the stronger the bench has gotten, the filter is now the hardest ones end up, or the most difficult ones come to me, and then I've sort of got to do that. So some of the, and it's fast paced, as we've moved, we'll talk about it later, but as we've moved right in the center of this whole AI infrastructure boom, and one of the key providers of silicon into that, it is as intense on a day-to-day basis here as it was, I felt like, when I joined the semiconductor industry in the mid-90s. I mean, it's that level of sort of daily intensity, opportunity management, what's going on with the customers, projects, people. It's very exhilarating, but it's very intense, and that's really picked up even more markedly in the last 3 years or so, since sort of the ChatGPT moment.
Okay.
And it was off to the races.
Okay, so you joined Marvell. You took the helm in 2016, so 10-year anniversary.
Almost 10 years. Yeah, July 2016, I became CEO.
Okay. So the company looks a lot different than it did 10 years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about what are some of the major changes. And you think that in 2016 that you were preparing the company for where it is today to take advantage of this, of the AI revolution? Or, I mean, did you plan it that far in advance or just got lucky, or what was it?
Yeah. Well, I think a few things. I think, obviously the company's scale back then was a lot smaller. It was around a $2 billion kind of revenue run rate company. This year, in 2026, sell side analysts have Marvell at kind of 10 billion in revenue. So we'll be up like five times or something off a really strong last couple of years. So one is the scale has changed in terms of revenue, the market cap, kind of the importance where we play. But I think we got here very intentionally. Okay, and the reason I say that is I don't think I ever thought it could be as big as it got so far, and I actually think we have way more runway ahead of us. I mean, I think we're actually finally ready to launch relative to where we were. If I go back to 2016, I mean, the primary revenues driver in the company was in consumer.
Mm-hmm.
It was in Wi-Fi chips. It was in storage controllers that sold into laptops. There was, like 60, 70% of the company revenue was in consumer. The rest was basically in enterprise, so selling to customers like Juniper or Cisco or people like that. And there was probably less than $50 million a year out of the $2 billion that was in data center or cloud or 5G or any of the new stuff that was coming. So we weren't, and I wasn't handed a strong deck at all for where the puck was going.
Right.
I had no assets to go after this cloud AI thing at all back then. And in my view at that time, and this is just born out of my own experience, having been in the semiconductor industry at that point for 22 years. Had a big job when I was at Maxim, where I spent that career. When I was at that company, analog companies is kind of interesting. You get exposed to every end market when you're at an analog company. So I spent 2 decades looking at every single end market known to man. There was a Maxim chip in there. And I formed a view when I was there that basically, it was born out of my own sort of experience, the biggest lever that companies were going to have on their future growth is really what end markets are you in? People tend to get confused. They think, well, if I just make a good part,
right,
then I can build a big company and go IPO or something. Or I hired the best engineering team, so I got the best team, so whatever I make, we can sell it. And then the third aspect, which gets underappreciated, is the market you're in. But the end market is ultimately what drives the TAM expansion. It drives the opportunity set. When an end market is growing, that's where all the opportunities flow. If you're in a stagnant market, but you have best team, best product, sometimes it doesn't matter how good the thing is. So when I was looking at it in 2016, I had a very strong view that, and I think I was actually very right on this one, that the next 10 years, which I can't believe I'm here now. I used to say, 10 years from now, here's what it's going to look like. That the biggest shift was going to be that the market cap in the world was all going to move to the data platform companies, social media companies, the AI, the infrastructure companies, from traditional oil, energy, tobacco, industrial goods, whatever, right, to data platform companies and the internet companies, which absolutely happened at a scale I don't think any of us could have imagined. And I basically said, I want to create a company that's exclusively focused on that.
Okay.
But I didn't have any revenue there. So I outlined for my board in December 2016. So it was basically, 5 months later. And I said, look, this is what I think we should do. We need to acquire companies to get there and probably divest some non-core assets. And the companies we listed, I listed on the slide, we were 4 companies and we acquired 3 of the 4.
Okay.
And then as part of that, I did some very thoughtful divestitures and then a lot of organic investment, and we kept the M&A thing going. But in the end, the revenue is now up like 5x, like I said, from where it was.
And 5x in completely new markets.
Yeah, and then the shift went from 70%, 60-70% consumer to 5%.
Wow.
So it's 95% now. This company is data infrastructure, which is telecommunications, AI, cloud, enterprise, those kind of B2B markets. And that's really hard to do, actually. Most companies, they can't move their end market mix. It's too difficult because you've got this embedded base and how do you transition it? And normally you have to shrink to grow, which we did a few different times along the way. But I think that part was prescient. And the mission statement that we wrote in January 2017, so basically a month after that, which was really 6 months in, was we want to be a company that is best in class in the semiconductor industry, that makes high-performance products that move data, store data, process data, and secure data. Do it faster, better, more reliably than anybody else. And that has been the mission vision statement for the last 9.5 years. Haven't changed it, same words. And I think it's actually more relevant now than it was back then. That was still a foreign concept. What is this data infrastructure thing you're talking about? And now we're in the biggest infrastructure build in the history of mankind. This time it's data. It's AI. So that was, I think that was a good call.
So how did this first-time CEO convince his board that this was the right decision? That is a bold move.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't straightforward. The board had gone through a lot of changes, including there was, the founders had gone off the board. Right. There was a new board that sort of got formed, which had some remnants of the old, but it was almost all new, including an activist investor at that time who was actually very constructive, but still a voice. There's still a voice on the board that was very, very, very sort of shareholder focused. Which not that I did anything that's not shareholder focused, but to go make these kind of bets, you actually have to really push yourself out in a 5-year kind of horizon, which means you have to make investments that aren't conventional. And I think I was very persistent, and I had a lot of conviction. And it turns out in this world, and this is how I roll too, when I'm at work and I push back on people or they have an idea and I see the conviction. I mean, that to me is huge. Okay. And so the first acquisition we did, just to give you an example, I had been the CEO for basically a year. By the time we announced it, it was a little over a year, which was the acquisition of Cavium. And if you remember, we spent 85% of our enterprise value to buy it. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of your company to give away, right? It was cash and stock. It was effectively a merger, right, where we combined it. And that was not the playbook of the typical go turn the company around, cut costs, kind of milk what you have, and then maybe just do some very, very incremental things over time. I felt like we fundamentally had to really make a big pivot. And I did all the cost cutting, by the way. I mean, it turns out it's hard to do both sometimes, be the strategic long-term thinker and actually figure out how to go cut your OpEx and rationalize your manufacturing and deal with your supply chain and your vendors and, consolidate sites. But I had a very strong experience in doing that out of necessity when I was at Maxim. So I did that first. Okay. So that created a huge amount of value just cleaning it up, because it was just at that point, I think there was a lot of opportunity to optimize, which I did, and that got the stock up and gave us some currency to go do what we did. But it took a lot of convincing. I mean, it took a lot of convincing to do Cavium in the end, because we were going to go take a huge risk. I mean, nobody spends that percentage of their company on something, but we did, and it was consequential because they were effectively 100% infrastructure Cavium. So overnight, my concentration shifted. Okay. Right, because they had zero. You take two companies together. We were bigger than them, but they added 100% of non-consumer revenue, which then was a more favorable end market mix, and from the investor standpoint. And as a result of that, actually, our multiple went up. So Marvell was trading at a very, very low price to earnings multiple relative to the semiconductor average. Cavium was a premium multiple because it was a high growth data infrastructure company with some cloud things that they were doing. And so what was crazy is the day we announced it, we re-rated the entire Marvell multiple up to the Cavium multiple.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So we got that credit. And then I think we had established a good track record on the cost side. So we announced cost synergies because we were combining these two, pretty significant companies together that were meaningful. And basically, if you just did the math, the shareholder base, basically the stock market gave us credit that we were going to achieve all those cost synergies as well. So like when I started, the stock was basically had been less than $10. By the time we announced Cavium, it was 18. So it had gone up like, a lot, almost 80%. And by the time we were done announcing Cavium, like it was 18 before we announced it. And then we announced it and it kind of got out in the press and we were at $24. So I mean, that added like another, so that was pretty, that was a great sort of start. And it wasn't all smooth and there's lots of issues, but that was, we realized that there was something there. And then we ended up doing a bunch more M&A and then just invested really, really aggressively, organically in the business. I mean, people think we just did a bunch of M&A and that's how we got there. I think the investments we've made on the internal R&D programs and how we allocate some of those to the M&As we do and how we integrate the M&A, the acquired companies, we keep their founders, we put them on the management team. So I think all that has led to a period where even in the last 10 years with all the cyclical ups and downs in the semiconductor industry, we've grown our R&D every single year, up year, down year, doesn't matter. It's a straight line up. Obviously bigger years, we do more. Now we aggressively reallocate within that because I think to get the, ultimately the capital allocation, it sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but that's like my number one job.
Okay.
Capital allocation. I told the board that when I was interviewing, and some were like, "What is that?" I said, "Well, we're spending $1 billion a year at that time on R&D. Does anybody know where it's going? What's it? What return are we getting on it? Where has it been spent? Ultimately, that's your most precious resource in a technology company. Right. Is ultimately where your investment is, and that's going to take 5 years for it to pay off. So it better be right." And so that's. You could do other things in allocating capital. You can sell businesses, you can buy things, you can buy back your stock. There's a finite list of things to do. But the biggest thing that ultimately every year we're spending money on is just our research and development budget. And where does that go? And so it's not just as simple as you just bought a company and you just let them run on their own. It's how do you integrate all of it? But that's, and even up until today, today, we just completed the acquisition of Celestial AI. And so they're all on board as of this morning. We announced it before the market. So we're still following the playbook.
You're always buying my members.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to have to charge you a premium.
That's right. But you seem like you keep growing new members too.
That's right.
So yeah.
So this leads actually into the next question, which is when people talk about your leadership, a lot of times the word culture comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and I've had the opportunity to watch the culture at Marvell. I get to work with a lot of your team. They're amazing. People love it here. They're so happy. They admire and respect you so much. So tell me in sort of one or two sentences, what is the culture at Marvell and what behaviors are you trying to reinforce?
Yeah, well, I viewed this as a really critical item when I became the CEO here. And there had been, a number of issues that had gone on in the company like the prior year and even before that. And I think there was just a feeling, and I came in and I felt like we needed to define the culture and behaviors that were needed going forward to make this successful. Because ultimately, again, you can have a great engineering team, you can have some nice IP, you can have patents, but it's ultimately, it's especially in a fabless design company, it's the people make this whole company. Mm-hmm. And so, but then how do people work together? How do you get alignment? How do you make it a great place to work so people want to stay? How do you make sure you have a common understanding of what's acceptable and what's not? So I'm a huge believer in this, based on my own experience from being at Maxim, which was founder led, and Jack Gifford, who was our founder at Maxim, he had a very strong view on culture, and he had 13 principles that he expected employees to follow and role model, and it just really resonated with me. And I saw it in action, like a very strong CEO, founder, leader who created an environment where people actually walk the walk and talk the talk. And if you didn't sort of follow those things, you were probably out, or you just weren't going to get advanced and have opportunity. And I was fortunate to have that experience. So on the Marvell side, at the same time we were coming up with the vision statement and what do we do with the business, same time, like January 2017, we had a leadership offsite and we had a bunch of brainstorming, but they used a kind of a process and a framework to get there. But basically, myself and Mitch Gaynor, who was our, for a long time, he joined right when I joined. He was our head of HR and legal and just a tremendous executive. He just retired this past year, but still helping us out. But he and I, along with the executive team, basically came up with our Marvell core behaviors, actually, not core values, but core behaviors, use that word, which is interesting. And there were 4 of them, and I won't go into like all the gory detail, but there's 4. And I think they were very appropriate for Marvell then, what we needed and what people needed to hear. And I think it's still resonating today. And as it turns out, these 4 behaviors, I mean, it's kind of motherhood and apple pie maybe, but it resonates with employees in every reach of the world. Okay. Every country we operate in, despite lots of cultural differences geographically, right, with where we operate. So the 4 of them, the first one is act with integrity and treat people with respect. And again, you might, and I actually the sub-bullet is lying and arrogance is not tolerated. And you sort of say, well, God, why do you have to say that? You should just be understood, right? But I think anyone that's worked in a corporate environment for any period of time realizes that's not table stakes. It should be. But I think it was a company, too, that needed to reestablish itself as a trusted partner out there and a company with integrity. And quite frankly, that part of it was actually the bedrock as well for a lot of our initiatives around making sure we had an inclusive culture, right? Making sure that we created opportunities for everybody. I mean, that's all in that treat people with respect line item, but it wasn't crafted as we have to come up with some response now because DEI is a thing now or people are pressuring us to do it. This was just like, this is the right thing to do. Right. Okay. So I think that resonates really well. That one was like, okay, it's a company's number one value is integrity and respect. The second one was really around innovating to solve customer problems. And the backdrop on Marvell was amazing engineering company, super creative, always known as innovative. But there was just so many projects that were just often in the weeds, no customer behind it, no real practical application, and nobody even thinking about how to commercialize it. And my experience, that's one of the worst things you can do to an engineer is stick them on a project that'll never have a commercial, that'll never sell. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you think it's a cool thing to work on. It's got to have some value in the end. People are generally very bummed out when that happens. So I'm very protective of that. So we put a framework around, ask that question, where's this going to go? The third one was executing with rigor and thoroughness. And again, we had a situation where very innovative products, but the chips were taking, depending on the product line, anywhere from 3 to 12 tape outs or spins per chip. Wow. It was a disaster, actually. So nothing was coming out on time. Engineering was all backlogged, and we had to put in a whole series of processes, procedures, methodologies to get the quality up, or else we weren't going to survive. And just as a side note, I mean, how far we've come, we've done like 20 to 30 5-nanometer tape outs and below in the last few years. And I think 85 or 90% of them are first pass success, A0. 100%, like no bugs, which is a huge change of like where we were then versus now. So that was a high impact. And then the final one was really, it's kind of interestingly worded. It's help others achieve their objectives, which is a little different than, hey, go collaborate, go kind of work as a team. It's actually very intentional, which is, again, born out of my own experience when you're in a company and especially if you're not in a higher level and you need help and someone says to you, well, that's not my job. Those aren't my goals. I don't need to get back to you. I think that I'm at a higher position or something. And, what we say is, look, people are coming to you because they need help. and they might need help because they're stuck. They might help because they're brand new. But whatever the thing is, they've actually reached out and had the courage to reach out, and then you're not allowed to blow them off. Actually, now that becomes your problem, and you got to help them out and get that off, help them move forward, and then get back to your own thing. And it's a refreshing way to look at things, actually, because in practice, it creates a very positive environment because it's like, hey, everyone's so helpful here.
Right.
Sounds obvious, but this is not how people sort of get wired up in a corporate environment. So that's it. Those are the 4 behaviors.
Okay.
We haven't changed them. They resonate well. There's obviously other things that identify sort of, who we are and what we do, but that's kind of the underpinning.
Okay.
Yeah.
The future of technology will be built on the foundation of advanced hardware and AI. For leaders in this space, the pressure to make the right call on everything from R&D to market expansion is immense. KPMG works with leaders who are building this future. They will help you navigate the risks, responsibilities, and the possibilities of transformational technology so you can make clearer, more confident decisions. When your trusted advisor understands the stakes, you can focus on what's next. Learn more at kpmg.com. Let's get back to the episode.
So obviously every CEO that I've worked with during my career, everybody has their own vibe, their own, different personality, way of communicating. Some
Right.
do it through one-on-ones, some do it, town halls.
Mm-hmm.
You have something very unique called the weekly Mat Note. Okay.
Right.
And I think it's, first of all, it's unusually personal and disciplined. And so tell me the thought process behind that and what you're hoping that your 7,000 employees get out of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. So I'm a big believer in communication, over communication, and you can't sort of talk to people enough. And this is my experience prior to being a CEO, just in my own career and seeing what worked. And so I think this is something I've prioritized. I found that when I was at Maxim and I started leading bigger groups, I found that my written communications made an outsized impact. And by the way, there's all kinds of things you can go do, right? And if you have a real, good communications team, and I'm not dismissing any of these ideas, but you can do a video blog, you can do an audio clip thing you can send, you can create your own thing on the SharePoint where you type something every once in a while. There's different ways you can communicate. Mm-hmm. And I tried some of those, hey, let's make a video, and I was never good on camera. I was always stilted, and so in the end, I found like I would just write these notes myself and then have somebody proof it, obviously, and send it. And it always got great feedback. Like, wow, I love that point of view. He's writing an email. And there's something about an email. Mm-hmm. It comes to you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's not, not you got to go find it somewhere. So then when I joined Marvell, I would send emails out periodically. Usually just more updates on things that were happening, but every once in a while, some perspective on a topic. And anytime I offered a perspective, it was like huge positive feedback. And then it was interesting. I went through a period where I'd been CEO for a few years, and I thought, well, now it's time to kind of let my team do more of the communication. I don't want to make this all about me, And so we actually, which was great, we set up very broad communications platform. So all the executives have their own support. They're doing their all hands. But it did feel like something was missing. And then the pandemic hit. Okay. And I remember going for a walk and talking to Chris Koopmans, who is our president and COO now. And back then he had a number of functions. One of them was corporate marketing and communications. And I remember being on this walk in the early days of the pandemic, and I'm talking to him on the phone, and I said, we're going to have to get a different playbook out here on communication. And I think we're going to have to get a weekly note out every week until this thing's over. Mm-hmm. And we got to offer, because at that point, if you remember, nobody knew what was going on. And people didn't trust what their governments were telling them. They didn't trust what the media was telling them.
We even did weekly board meetings at GSA.
We had the weekly board meetings on the GSA.
Or monthly, I guess.
But whatever. Yeah. But between all the different, so much communication. So I felt this obligation too. Like nobody's really getting a clear, like nobody, like who's going to be talking to everybody. So I said, let's fire these up. And I had like 10 ideas of like notes we would write on all kinds of different topics, by the way. But the first one in March 2020, the title was Coronavirus. And then you can look every week, basically since then, I put something out, and they range from touching on, hey, we're doing an M&A, here's the background. They range into my own experience on a number of topics, like problems I've faced or issues I've had or things I've seen. I wrote one, at my 5-year anniversary. It was called The Job That Nobody Wanted. If you remember, like the Marvell job was sort of like, who's going to go take that job? And it was this whole history of jobs I took while I was in my prior company that nobody wanted. And anyway, so, but get relatively personal in some of them, but always with a teach and pass on knowledge kind of a mindset. And so it does help, especially as the company's grown, to at least have a touch point, even if you can't be traveling everywhere to see everybody or you can't be meeting with people. And they continue to get very, very, very positive response from employees on it. And people say, don't get rid of it. Don't keep sending those. So it's an apparatus now to get it to do it, because it takes a lot of discipline, to your point. But I think it has become a key cornerstone of my leadership and my communication style.
What's the toughest news you had to deliver in one of those?
I don't know if I have a toughest, but some of them were definitely. It's always the serious issues, like, George Floyd.
Okay.
Not the. And again, I just let me give you one backdrop. We are the company itself is one that I've really tried hard to create an environment that it's not a political company. Okay, so just like there's CEOs that take stands on issues because they personally believe in that particular issue, as an example. And I frame everything that I discuss as, how does it relate to Marvell or Marvell's set of core behaviors or values, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so even when these are things that can shake people, right? When there's tragedy in a country, right? Flooding in India, earthquake, California fires. Some of those, the conflict in the Middle East, right? Even that, like we have a big operation in Israel, as an example, that people were directly impacted, but also employees we have that are from other parts of the Middle East that are also feeling their own impact, right? So it's trying to communicate the empathy and the acknowledgement of what people in our company are going through. And it means a lot to them, right, to hear that take. But I don't try to foist my own, this is Matt's view. I think it's very arrogant when people do that, actually, when they really think that because they're a CEO, everyone else should just listen to them on their particular point of view or political belief or whatever. So I'm not saying I don't want to water it down, but I try to take it from the human angle and how it might affect employees that are feeling something at that time. So those are the harder ones to write. There's not that many of them, and I can't comment on everything, but I think when it's significant enough, we do that. And then of course, you have disappointing news, you have ups and downs in the business, and at a layoff or headcount reduction or something happened, so selling a business, right? Oh my God, what are we doing? I was friends with all those people. Now they're going to some other company. So it's trying to lead through change and trying to explain where we're going and the why. And I think that's where the notes help, because it creates a continuum of communication and a bedrock versus, oh, here comes the note from the boss. And then What does this mean? I'm sure there's conspiracy theories, and every time I write one, and said something a certain way, but it's just genuinely an attempt to bring thousands of people who, by the way, have spouses and children and parents maybe, and who big extended family relies on this company.
Right. They have lives outside of Marvell.
They have lives outside of Marvell, and what happens in Marvell affects them. And so I think. I'm just trying to do my part to provide insight and communication to the employees of the company. I think they deserve it.
Yeah, no, I love it. So I want to go back a little ways, or actually all the way. I want to go back to and discuss your childhood a little bit. Be very Barbara Walters-esque.
Okay.
So obviously we all carry our childhoods with us, and events, circumstances, people all impact the adults that we become, the leaders that we become. So maybe just tell us about whether it's, again, people or circumstances from your childhood that you can sort of directly relate to how you do something. And I know specifically you've spoken about your father. Maybe you can, tell us his impact on, and especially your whole integrity and work ethic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. I think my father was absolutely a role model for me. And growing up, it was a little bit unusual in that I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and my father's side, you can guess the last name Murphy, the lineage there, but both my grandparents were first-generation Irish Americans, so there's a whole sort of Boston East Coast contingent. That's where my dad was born, but I moved around a lot as a kid growing up. He started. So he ended up becoming a CEO, by the way, like my father. Okay. But he started off in high tech sales, and he was at Honeywell originally selling mainframes in New York and East Coast, and then he went to work for Wang, if you remember Wang Computer, and his career sort of took off there, and so because he was in sales, got these different opportunities to move into different regions. And so he was at Wang. So we moved from the East Coast to California. Actually, we lived in Vancouver for a year, and I spent a lot of time in Southern California. But in the early '80s, he joined Apple from Wang in the first sales force that was built as Apple was really growing. And Bill Campbell, who was the head of sales at the time, working for Steve Jobs, hired my dad. And so I lived in San Diego, Orange County, LA, the Bay Area. So I moved around a lot growing up. And I think the reason I just bring that up, that's relevant, is I had to adapt to very different situations with different people all the time, and kind of being the new person. And I didn't grow up like a lot of people that are great friends of mine now that grew up in the same neighborhood, same house, same school district, that whole embedded process. I didn't have that. So, and it was hard. I mean, it was definitely hard. I would say I'm so lucky to have had it happen. I was just friends from every one of those places that I lived, and I went to multiple different high schools because so what happened is he kept getting promoted and would take these jobs, and he would just take the job. So you're a director now and you can be a senior director, you take the job. You can be a VP, take the job. Kids were moving. And he was very committed to his family and to our family, in terms of our well-being, financial stability. You got to just go work to go make that happen. And he would take the opportunities. And I have no regrets about that at all. A lot of people say, I'm scarred for life. I can't believe I had to move. People now, you say, oh, we're going to move. What's it going to do to the kids? I'm like, it's probably the best thing that could ever happen, potentially. You got to look at, but you can definitely become a victim in life if you want on anything. Right. And I actually see only the positive in that. So I saw his dedication and work ethic to his family, to his career. And then he ultimately after Apple, became a CEO of a couple different companies. And so then when I started my career, I really bonded with him in a different way because he was sort of helping me as I was coming up through my career. And it was kind of like this onion that was unpeeling as I was like, a marketing manager. And then I was kind of like a director, and I had people reporting to me. And then all of a sudden I was going to be like a GM of like a small business. And along the way, I would get these different insights from him that had not been unlocked yet.
Okay. And
all the way to finally, becoming a senior executive. And then at one point, actually at Maxim, I ran sales, which was kind of a, back to the future. He was a sales leader for 5 years. From 2006 to 2011, I was a sales vice president for Maxim, which I had no experience in sales, but I got thrown into that job when I was 33. and tremendous experience. But he helped me all along the way. And then, again, a great mother as well. So it was a great upbringing.
Okay.
But I definitely saw the power of the work ethic and the commitment to family, and kind of not working scared, but working like you got to take care of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did success look like for the children in the family? I mean, did they say, we want you to, go this direction, or?
No. I think, I think we all had different paths we took, and I think it was more of a, they were just very supportive parents. I was a high school athlete, and my sister and brother did different things too, but there was no like, you have to do this or you have to do that. I think the role modeling was important, and then guiding and supporting us along our journeys, but not overly invasive at all. Very present, but not prescriptive. But I definitely probably looked at it and said, I definitely want to, I want to work in high tech, and and then the chip industry was interesting because of all that's happened to it.
Right.
And so I think that, and my parents were living in the Bay Area. He was working at Apple when I was out of school. So, so it was great. It was fun. I mean, it was fun having him around. In those years where I was really growing in my career and bonding with my parents in a different way.
Yeah, it's fun to be friends with your parents, or now for us, being friends with your kids when they're adults.
Yeah,
it's entirely different relationship.
It's great. It's really interesting to see, and appreciating them and I think that's kind of my take too. I'm not trying to be prescriptive on them, but kind of try to make sure, help them figure out maybe what they're interested in or not, and just support it,
right?
Versus be over the top and
no helicopter parenting.
No, not for me.
Right.
Yeah,
I get it.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley celebrated its 90th anniversary last year, and its tech investment banking team has prided itself in working with the most innovative entrepreneurs and leadership companies for decades. During that time, they've led IPOs for hundreds of tech companies, including Apple, Arm, Astera Labs, Broadcom, Cisco, Facebook, Google, NVIDIA, Salesforce, and Uber. In addition, they worked as a trusted advisor and executed thousands of M&A transactions for some of the most industry-defining deals in technology. Throughout the years, Morgan Stanley's tech investment banking team's success has been achieved by dedication, consistency, and a North Star purpose of helping its clients to maximize their opportunities and overcome their challenges. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so you've talked a little bit about being with Maxim. You were there for 20 years.
22 years.
22 years.
Yep, 22 years.
And so talk about maybe both your academic career and then the early part of your career at Maxim. What were some of the key decisions that you made that you look back on and say, that's the reason I'm here today?
Yeah. Well, I think one is there was a moment. So I joined in 1994, and I was basically in product marketing, and kind of like they called it. The title there was called business manager, and it was actually interesting. The CEO's view was like there was no title marketing manager, actually. You call it business manager, and there's a title called associate business manager, which is basically like tactical marketing. So it was like pricing, forecasting, helping write ads for EE Times, things like that. And it was a very simple product line I had. And then at some point, if as the company grew, you could go from being an associate business manager to a business manager. So then you're kind of like in charge of that business. And then there was a business director, and then there was a director. So there was like a career progression. And but there was a moment where I wasn't. And that was going well. I mean, actually, it was very adept at it, and my product lines did well. And at some point, I was running my own product line pretty early on. It was the one that nobody wanted, by the way. I was working for a guy. I was working for a guy who retired, and like they couldn't find anyone to run his product line. Like it was like the Rodney Dangerfield of product lines. No respect.
Right.
And so they just gave it to me. I mean, I was probably 25, 26 years old, and I was running this like $30, $40 million business, which whole company was like $400 or $500 million, So I felt like that was mine.
Right.
And then I was growing it and doing pretty well. And then there was this opportunity right around 2000, and it was for a higher level position. So the head of corporate marketing for all of Maxim like came open basically. Like the woman that ran it was retiring or something, and I think it reported to Jack directly. It was like the position, the title was like 2 or 3 levels higher than I was at. And even though I was kind of doing well at what I was doing, I was like, well, that looks interesting, right? Because that's a company-wide thing, and it's more prestigious because the title was better and the pay would have been better. And there was people that were trying to get me to do that job. And then I ended up talking to Jack about it. And I didn't really, Jack was like this, you weren't buddies with Jack, okay? He was a old school, hardcore semiconductor, Fairchild, from Fairchild, had co-founded AMD, president of Intersil, founded Maxim, from that era, okay?
Right.
And I remember asking him his advice, and he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he said, and he said, I could see both things. He said, but if you stay in this business management track, I believe you can go all the way. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what that means, but maybe I could be a VP someday. Maybe I could be a general manager. But I'm not going to tell you what to do, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back, I really thought about it, talked to my dad, and I'm like, you know something? This other path is really where I would want to be. I just wasn't sure I could ever get there. And I stuck with it. And then, yeah, I was successful. I did a good job. And then, yeah, it was crazy. It ended up taking me longer to get the same title I would have gotten.
Okay.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe, 4 or 5 years longer. But then I went and basically in like 2006, then out of nowhere, the founder of, one of the co-founders of Maxim retired, who had been the head of sales from the very beginning, Fred Beck, and I was his successor.
Okay.
So he was probably 75, 76, 77 when he retired. I was 33.
Wow.
You guys in that transition? But again, it was a springboard because I think I had stayed in the right area. And
so it's not about, it's just, you don't just chase a title.
No,
you chase.
I see it all the time. Chase the path, and I think, but him telling me, and I try to do this. I call this. It's like one of the most beautiful things you can do for somebody is you can give them the gift of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
The gift of confidence. It's amazing when somebody of a high stature or that you really respect genuinely does that. And he could see it. He could see it. And again, at that point, when he said that to me, I wasn't even 30 years old. I was probably 28. And he was probably 57 or something, or close to 60. So, but now I can see it.
Right.
Actually, now having gotten older, and I can relate so much now to Jack, where I never thought I could understand the man. But as I've become a CEO and gotten older and have all the experience now, I realize, oh, that's why he did what he did, or that's why he thought what he thought.
Right.
So he did that to me a couple different times along the way, just these little nudges, which was pretty cool. And in the end, I ended up as basically the number 2 executive in that company before I left, and had a great partnership with the guy that took over for him, Tunç Delucia, who you know.
Right.
And I worked for Tunç for 10 years, and it was great working for him and get all this other experience. And then I ultimately moved to Marvell, but it was pretty cool to have gone through that journey there. And Jack passed away in 2009, but he was a supporter up until that point of me, and I think he would have been very proud, I think, of how I ended up doing there.
Right.
And I think just sticking with it, and I think making this move here, I think he would have thought that was a great one too, because at by the time I left, I mean, Maxim was on a great path on its own. Tunch was doing a great job. Marvell looked like it needed a lot of help. And when I talked to the board, I realized, I know it's kind of the unconventional candidate. I actually, when I looked at the problem set, I thought I'm probably the best person in the world to fix this.
That confidence.
Yeah, I really did. I really believed I could get in there. And I felt at that point, honestly, that Marvell needed me more than Maxim needed me.
Because that had to be hard leaving. I mean, you probably thought you were going to be the CEO there someday.
Yeah, I mean, they actually, when I left, the memo said, we're really sorry that Matt's going because he was the successor.
Okay.
So it was a known thing. But sometimes there's timing issues.
Right.
You can't get the timing perfect. And again, I think it's a case too where it would have been the honor of my life to be the CEO of Maxim. Honor of my life. No question about it, given the legacy and the history. But the timing was such, and this was such a compelling thing. Mm-hmm. And again, it wasn't there. I just felt like I had done, and there's always more you can do. But when I compared the two, it was like, this is something that I could really shape myself. I could really build. And I bet on myself. It wasn't because I didn't just take it because it was, oh, now I get to be a CEO. I had CEO job offers before that.
Okay.
I had one in 2013.
Okay.
And I actually did not accept it and ultimately decided I wanted to stay. And I never even told Tunch until after I had declined it.
Okay.
But same deal. I just said, I'm better off as an SVP here and just kind of stick it out. And so I because of the scale, the impact I wanted to make, and I felt like I had unfinished business. So it's just kind of how I operate. So
you obviously became, I mean, you learned a lot from Jack, but you said that he wasn't really, a traditional mentor.
Right.
And I mean, you're a strong advocate for mentorship. And, one of the things that I admire so much about you is that you want to prepare people for what their next role will be. Yeah. And we see that you've done, so much work with the Women's Leadership Initiative. You have an executive program. Yeah. So why is that so important to you?
Well, I mentioned this phrase earlier, which is teach and pass on knowledge. And that was actually, Maxim principle number 4.
Okay.
Teach and pass on knowledge. It really, really resonated with me because I just believe that there's a obligation and a duty of leaders to provide their insight, their support, their help to the next generation. I think it's just something you should do. You shouldn't be so if you're blessed enough to become a CEO or a senior executive, that means somebody along the way helped you out. You didn't just completely get there. You had people, mentors, supporters along the way. And that sometimes happens in structured ways. Sometimes it happens in very unstructured ways. And I felt for myself, I had, a patchwork, right? I had my father who was never invasive, but he was a guy I could call every day and bounce things by. I had someone like Jack Gifford who I was able to observe. Mm-hmm. I was in a lot of meetings with him. That's how the way he ran it was a smaller company, so you could do it. I was a young person. I got to sit in meetings with a guy all day long, watch him yell at everybody else and what he got pissed off about and how he would handle problems and solve problems. And so I saw the company, the culture he built and how he thought of what he prioritized. But then I kind of did a lot on my own too. I mean, I attended the Stanford Executive Program in 2010, which is their EMBA program. It's been around for, 40, 50 years, right? You become an alumni of the Stanford Business School when you're done. It's very, very prestigious program, and it was unbelievable experience. I mean, you literally don't work for like 8 or 10 weeks. You live on campus. They put you through the whole thing. I drove it that I wanted to go to that. I made that happen. And I had to get a backup for me at Maxim, and I had to get Tunch to agree, and there was a whole process. But nobody sort of sent me there. But I went there and it was such an incredible experience that I started sending people to it.
Okay.
And I still do that at Marvell. I did it at Maxim, I did it at Marvell. And that was a little bit of the genesis of what we call so that's called SEP, Stanford Executive Program. So now we have MEP, Marvell Executive Program, which was the same kind of concept, which is how do I then provide at scale a lot more leadership development for people. But that's the exec education. That's kind of like, and the Stanford one was also the fundamentals. It was accounting, strategy, the kind of fundamental classes you would take in the business school that just all compressed, obviously. But then also, like, I put myself out there on networking. Like, I got us to join the SIA board, as an example. We were not a member at Maxim, and I remember thinking we should be a member. We're an important company. Why aren't we part of this? And worked with, at the time, John Dana, who was the chair of the SIA that year, and ultimately Maxim agreed to join, and he was the board chair or the board representative. I was the alternate, but I got to go to a lot of the meetings. So, and again, I was just doing that to like expand my network and see what else was out there. I got opportunities to go to some of the McKinsey T30 events, where I was like one of the few non-CEOs there, but I sort of worked my way in, and I just learned so much from so many people by putting myself out there, and that really helped me become a CEO. So I think me seeing what the power of that can do for somebody, I try to provide that more intentionally for people, versus just, and again, at the end of the day, I always tell people that you got to be in charge of this. Like, you're in charge of your career. Like, nobody is going to go hand you this thing on a silver platter. Nobody's just going to show up and be your mentor one day. Like, you have to seek all this out, but sometimes you need a lift.
Right.
And again, sometimes certain populations of people might be more underserved, or not even be in a job or a role where they would be able to get experience that way, right? So I just think it's a really important thing, and I think we really have to grow the next generation of leaders in the semiconductor industry for this industry to continue to thrive.
Right. You were saying at the CEO Council meeting in December that you guys right now are hiring a lot of young people, specifically because of the importance of AI. So is that a strategy of the company?
Oh, big time. Yeah, I think there's two aspects of it. One is I'm a big believer in intern programs and new college hire programs. For some of the same reason, right? We're a big, successful company. We should be able to provide opportunities for people, even if they don't join ultimately. But hey, I worked at Marvell. What an incredible experience. And this happens a lot of times. I'm linked in with a lot of them, the interns, and then I see that they intern at Marvell, and then I get the update that they're now working at Apple or Google or somewhere else. But I kind of smile and go, you know what, good for them. And maybe someday they'll come back around because we gave them a great experience. But when I joined Maxim, it was all young people there, all young people. I mean, they were hiring so many people out of school. The VPs, were like 30 to 35. The senior people. Now, when you're 21, they look like old. Like they're like, they have kids, they have mustaches, they're like wear suits, like but they were all very young when I look back. And then Jack himself was probably 50, 51. So he was the experienced guy. But what a young company.
Yeah, no, I'm actually surprised to hear that.
Is incredible. And I had so many friends through that, and such a great sense of camaraderie, and you didn't want to leave. It was very retentive. You weren't off isolated. There was a lot of social things, but also you learned from everybody else. It's competitive. So I started that at Marvell when I joined. There was no intern program. We had nothing, and we built it up. For the last 10 years, we've got like 500 interns now. Global program, professionally done. I mean, really world class. And then we hire aggressively now for then the incoming seniors. And what's happened with the sort of AI tools, and we've taken a different tact. I mean, we actually can see how the improvement in productivity and the tools can actually get young engineers up to speed faster.
Okay.
Versus how do we replace people with AI? I'm thinking, how do I get young people in, right? And so we had last year, we had our 38% of our hires were Gen Z. So Marvell is going to be a young company. And I think that talent infusion is tremendous because otherwise you get this aging, it's like any demographic. Right? It's like a country. Right? At some point, if the birth rate drops and you're not adding new people, I mean, all kinds of problems happen. And we have sites as an example. We have a lot of senior tenured people. We haven't been hiring at the right rate to refresh. And I don't want to see those sites die off. I want to see those sites thrive. So you actually have to hire a certain number of people to who are going to fill that. So we have a very interesting demographic here. We have a lot of young people. We have a lot of very experienced people, everybody in between. We like to have a life cycle for folks, right, where they can join out of school and become a senior person, become a senior engineer, become an executive. We try to provide it so you can have a long-term career here. But yeah, I'm going the opposite way. I'm hiring a lot of young, bright, smart people. They're so motivated. They're all fired up to it's actually very motivating.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You were talking about Jack yelling at a meeting. You said at the U.S. Executive Forum that you thought the industry was getting kinder, and I think that's so funny because there was the generation of the stories you hear. It was survival of the fittest
for sure.
And then between companies, the competition is so intense that people don't speak to each other sometimes. And it's always one of the things that I've loved about GSA is that competitors sit across the table from one another.
Right.
So why did you say that? What is getting kinder about this industry?
Well, I just think, and maybe it was a sign of the times, but I think that initial breed and that initial group of semiconductor CEOs of the Andy Grove, Jack Gifford, TJ Rogers type of approach, Charlie Spork, a number of them, I think is what was needed.
Okay.
It was needed to have people that were just doggedly passionate, ferocious competitors, high exacting standards, right? No tolerance for BS. And then you overlay personality on top as well, right? You can't fake it. Like people, like Jack had his style, and then some people that worked there would try to be Jack, and it just didn't work. Like you can't berate somebody if you can't back it up and you don't really have the substance behind it. And like we all knew the guy really cared. He was very, very intimidating, but underneath, and you could see it in his actions with employees and people, he had a huge heart. Okay. So I think that, and I think people's, tempers can get in the way and emotion control. It's something I've had to work on. I was a total fireball and still am sometimes, but maybe I got some of that from him. I was not naturally, not naturally aggressive in that way, if you will. But I think I learned, in my early years of my career that, yeah, you do have to stand up for yourself. You do have to stand up for what you believe is right. You have to be willing to battle. You have to be willing to have people test you and push back and test their conviction. And but then at some point, it can create a negative too. Mm-hmm. So I think that's always something that I've worked on, is trying to make sure in the end I'm coming from a really good place, but sometimes you can let emotion take over. And I've gotten way better at that, but there was a period where I was getting docked on my bonus every year as an executive because they were like, "Hey, you need to take it down a notch,"
I would have loved to see that. So you can lead with heart and not be perceived as soft.
Exactly, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and you need to be a hard ass a lot of the time, but it doesn't mean you have to be an unkind person.
Right.
And I think having the empathy for the situation is really important at all times. Just trying to put yourself in that other person's seat, even if, and sometimes you got to use emotion or you got to use tone or whatever to make your point. Sometimes people don't listen, or you want to know you're serious.
Right.
But I always try to do it from a place of I just want to save you from yourself, right? I want to help you get better, and maybe you need to come out of there and say, God, I just got beat up a little bit. I need to come back and pull myself together. It's a technique that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So being the CEO, being a leader in general, but being a CEO specifically, especially at your level, it's a pretty profoundly solitary role. Mm-hmm. And a lot of responsibility that you're bearing. You were talking about the 7,000 people who have, another whatever, 21,000 people dependent upon them. So how do you deal with that from an emotional and personal perspective? And maybe even some of the hacks that you used when you first became a CEO to help kind of combat that, I don't know, loneliness. I mentioned loneliness to Lisa, and she's like, I have people around me all the time.
Right.
But it's not, that's not really, it's not lonely from having people around. It's from the decision ultimately is yours.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that helps with that, we have great forums where leaders get together, right? GSA is a fabulous forum where you can interact with other CEOs and executives who are going through it like you are. I'm also on the board of the SIA. We talked about that. That's similar. I'm part of a CEO group here in Silicon Valley called CCI, and there's a number of us that are in there. So I think that's helpful to have peers and people you can talk to about things you're going through. I'm pretty transparent with my team. So the leadership team I formed over the years, it's very trusted, and they generally know what's going on with me. But I do. But at the end of the day, when you're the CEO, all the problems come to you, and the buck stops with you. I wouldn't say there's any hacks, but I think the way I try to stay true as much as I can, because people definitely lose themselves in this job. And over time, I can see it. They forget why they got here. They forget what it was like to not be a young person. They forget, they focus on themselves too much, or they focus on, how to solve too many cult of personalities, too many. So those issues can creep in. I think writing the notes every week is very helpful, right? It kind of keeps, there's a grounding there when you're on the hook to talk to people.
Okay.
So I think that, and I think the other one is a rule I use, which is called if Matt bumps into an employee in the hallway and they ask about something, how am I going to answer it? Like, hey, you made this decision, right, on shutting down this product line. This executive left, why? I don't think, you're not paying us fairly, just whatever. Like, I really think about it as like, hey, am I doing all the right things in this company every day when nobody's looking? So that when they ask me up in the hall, I have a clean answer. I'm not hiding anything.
I love that.
Is that, and one example was just like we did, like when I became CEO, I just said up front, this was not a requirement at the time, but I believed in it. And I said, I really want to make sure we have pay equity in Marvell. And it's actually, turns out it's a big process when you have 5,000 people. You have to hire an actuary and to get a whole like HR legal framework. And if you're it's a whole process to set it all up to make sure, because you have to think about all the levels and titles of people and the bands and by geography, because you want to make sure in the end you're paying everybody fairly, right? Especially on gender, right? Which was been such a huge focus, right, in the world and in corporate America. So I set this up proactively in 2016 and 2017. Nobody told us to do it. Never discussed it with the board, right? Just me, Mitch, the legal team, put it in place, and then never talked about it. Never told anybody we did it.
Okay.
But then I remember I was in a meeting in India sometime in 2018 or 19, and there was a women's roundtable. And we have such a great team in India, and it was just a meeting with them, and they were all fired up on all kinds of topics, and we were having a great discussion. And one of them was just like, basically a little bit like, yeah, well, when are you going to start paying us the same as everybody else? I said, well, let me tell you something. That's already been fixed 4 years ago.
Wow. And
it was like, huh? Well, I don't think so. I said, no. And I said, you know what? We look at it every year. And actually, out of the billion, at that time, $1.2 billion, $1.5 billion we were spending on people every year, I think we had $300,000 or $400,000 we got it down to on any given year of like adjustment.
Okay.
It's nothing, right? Nothing. Like just, and we make the adjustment. So then it was like, then they basically said, well, why didn't you tell us? I said, because I want you guys to count on me to be doing the right thing so you can go do your jobs. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but that is kind of the mindset I try to carry in.
Right.
That the team trusts me.
You know, you do things with, I think that, when we had a sort of readjustment of the Women's Leadership Initiative within GSA, and a lot of companies backing down and, we can't have our name associated with it. I mean, you came into the board and actually just said, this isn't the right thing.
Right.
You need to step up and keep
Right.
your commitments. And
Yeah.
so I see that.
Just do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do the right thing. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about AI. We can't get away from it, right?
Okay.
So tell me of when was the sort of aha moment for you that this AI revolution, this technology transition, isn't a typical one that we see in the industry?
Well, let me give you the setup to it. We made the pivot, as I talked about, to the infrastructure market and the cloud, right? And we did actually an analyst day in 2018, and there's a slide that shows kind of what we thought the future computing trends were going to be and where things were going. And one of them was, ARM-based compute versus x86, and one of them was sort of like purpose-built offload chips, aka custom silicon, DPUs, things like that. And one of them was AI acceleration. And we actually had a chip from Cavium that was a inference accelerator chip in 7 nanometer. It was a very competitive part. In the end, my view and Raghib Hussain, who was a co-founder of Cavium that was on my team for a long time, he and I both concluded, like, we need to basically, this whole AI thing's going to happen, but the hyperscalers are going to just build these themselves. And we knew that because we were talking to all the customers. So I give you that background because back in 17, 18, I was looking at how we were going to invest in AI, okay, and what we needed to do. And we made a strategy there. And ours was to bet on custom, and we acquired Avera, which was a spin out of Global Foundries, IBM, which was where we got our custom silicon team. So we were, and I would just give you one other data point. When we were doing the due diligence on Inphi in 2020, their business was really ramping, but that was in traditional cloud computing. But they said, oh, by the way, we've won all these AI clusters. And they just had these block diagrams and pictures of all the famous ones now that and it was all Inphi interconnect chips everywhere. And I remember thinking, and Ford Tamer, the CEO of Inphi at the time, who joined the board afterwards, we both had a common view that don't know how big this could be, but if it hits, it could be significant. But that was not in my deal model. Okay. So I give you all that background just to let you know, we didn't wake up at Marvell in 2023, 2022, ChatGPT and say, oh, now we got to get into AI. This thing was 5, 6, 7 years before that happened. But it clearly, when ChatGPT released, everybody had their moment where they realized this was something different. That was at the end of 22. And then in 23, when it was clear it was going to affect us, the initial reaction actually by investors was, this is going to be bad for Marvell. There's this many ports in a traditional server, and they had the math all wrong. So we spent like a month or two like digging in, and we're like, oh my God, look at the content per server we're getting now. And then these programs that we had won a bunch of custom programs and had done a bunch of things for AI. That all of a sudden, all those forecasts started shooting up. And we're like, okay, this is probably going to be pretty big. And it was crazy because us and NVIDIA announced one time on the same day, I think it was May 23.
Okay.
And we said, hey, we're going to do $200 million in AI this year, 2023, and $400 million in 2024. We went up like 40, 50% in one day. So did NVIDIA. NVIDIA, that's when they were already ripping, but they had another big up. So we both up on that. I mean, if you look now, we'll do about $6 billion in 2025 in data center, of which most of that's AI now. Okay, so we thought it was a big deal to do 200, 400, and now it's a monster number. And if I look out in the next few years, this is just going to be a significant business for Marvell, for the industry. But I think it was a long time in the making. It wasn't just a wake up. I think if you're a semiconductor company, you woke up with ChatGPT and said, now we got to get into AI, you're toast.
Right.
It's over.
You had to have already made the preparations.
You had to make the preparation.
5 to 7 years in advance, right? Of
course. That's how long it takes to develop the product and have the concepts and bring it through and POC it and test it. And you can't just have started.
Right.
Yeah.
You think that people underappreciate Marvell's role in AI?
Well, I think it's understood we're one of the key handful of players of scale that are going to make an impact. Um, yeah, I think there's varying views, certainly maybe from the investment community on how big it can be for us, and there's a lot of noise in the system now, Jody, that never was around Marvell before. We're a very understated company. Most people think we're the comic book company or something. We don't get the headlines of the large peers, and I'm good with that. Like I just want to have built a great company and get rewarded for the success and enable a place where people can work, do their best work, build a career, make money, buy a house, send your kid to college, feel like you made an impact. So that's all been happening. But yeah, there's a lot of like articles and rumors and weird stuff that's coming out that's affects our valuation at the moment. But
Right.
it doesn't change the business trajectory. And in the end, I'm not dismissing it, but these things work themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at our prospects, let's say we can do 10 billion plus this year, and I look in 27 and 28 and all of the things that are coming, it's going to be a very significant company. So all that's going to work itself out. So maybe we're somewhat underappreciated or just, we maybe need to demonstrate some more results. That's fine. But in the end, I'm beyond confident in where we're heading and that the investments we made were the right ones. We got the right team. And I think any sort of discounting that's being given to us probably goes away over time if we just execute and do what we say. If we do what we say, we're off to the races.
So you think that, does it worry you a bit that, the semiconductor industry has always been a cyclical business. When you look at what's happening with memory right now, being, one of the gating factors in how quickly we accelerate.
Right.
So, do you worry that, okay, we're just in a good cycle now, but our time is coming again?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this for 32 years. I've been on the front lines, right, of every major industry cycle and correction since the 95, 96 correction, which nobody even remembers. It's a massive correction in 96 coming off in 95. Mm-hmm. The industry was down almost .com levels. At some point and it was just a big supply demand imbalance thing. Anyway, so that's the nature of the beast. And anytime somebody says it's the new normal, it's going to be different this time, it's never that way. So sure, there'll be something at some point. Will it be exogenous, some other black swan event in the world, or will it just be like the pandemic? The pandemic was sort of a supply-driven phenomena that then turned into over-inventory, and people are still correcting on that one. Not us. We took our medicine on the part of our business that was exposed to that, but some people are still recovering. So it may happen, but the 5-10 year plot on this in terms of this AI infrastructure build and the value unlock that AI is providing in terms of global productivity, like it all adds up. It's all in the details of like, which customers are you in with, right? What's real and what's not, so we're being very mindful about kind of the projects we take and where we invest our capital allocation, but it's an up and to the right for sure. And even if there's a slowdown, I can tell you this, our customers are not going to slow down, right? They're going to keep that innovation train cranking, and we aren't either. Look at, like I said, I've been through a bunch of really, really spiky years in the 10 years I've been CEO. We've grown our R&D every year.
Right. So
we'll manage it. We always can manage it. We're a big, strong company. We have a very strong financial profile. So if something hits us, we'll deal with it. But it doesn't change the outlook. The industry, we were talking about $1 trillion by 2030, and that would seem like this crazy rally cry, and it's going to happen earlier.
Yeah, talk about 1.3 now.
Yeah.
So what worries you most as a human being about this new AI era that we're in?
I don't know. I think there's always things to worry about in this world. And there's all these hypotheticals on the potential destructiveness of AI or AI gone awry, I think is what you're referring to, or can something bad happen with it? I don't know how worrying about it's going to change it at this point. I think that people obviously are aware and need to pay attention. I think it's creating huge opportunities in the economy. I think any of these massive industrial revolution-like things create disruption and dislocation, but it's also is going to create huge economic prosperity. And so I don't know. I don't think I want to wax pontificate yet on the dangers of it, and I think we should all be mindful. But but for the moment, we're going to follow our customers, and we're going to participate big time in this build. And I do think it's going to have, like everything, humans in the world figure out how to channel things appropriately. They put safeguards up when things don't work. I'm not trivializing the risk, but there's risk in everything. There's a lot you can worry about every day.
Right. Yeah.
I got enough to worry about running this company.
I'm not going to add that to your list.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sports, not as necessarily a hobby, but as a sort of breeding ground for leaders. I remember one time Jim Cramer said that he would never hire anyone who hadn't played sports or been on a team. I tried to find that on ChatGPT. It wouldn't show me. So I'm sure Jim's going to call and say, I never said that, but I heard it.
Right.
But anyway, tell me a little bit about, because you're an athlete,
Right.
Tell me a little bit about how you think that prepared you and maybe still helps prepare you today.
Well, I think certainly I think people come from all kinds of different backgrounds in their careers, right? And so I think there's an argument to be made that certainly athletes, and in particular collegiate athletes, can bring something to the table, right? That and I mean, Maxim was a case where Jack was a UCLA baseball player. He had a potential to go in the MLB. He didn't. He was an engineer and worked at Fairchild, and big sports enthusiast, and would hire athletes. And so I've been around that framework before. It makes sense, but I don't think I worked with a lot of people over the years. Like some of them aren't athletes, and it doesn't matter, right? Okay. So I think just to set that aside. But for me, what helped was being an endurance athlete, and subsequent to high school and college when I ran, I started doing triathlons in my 20s and 30s, and then kind of made a comeback in my 40s and raced a bunch of half Ironmans. I did 2 full Ironmans. I was reasonably competitive and really enjoyed that as actually a part of my life to kind of keep some balance and keep me fit and keep me competitive. But I think where it helped me early on, and even helps me today, it helped me early in my career. I could outwork everybody. Okay. I mean, I could just work longer hours. You get very attuned as a distance runner, and especially a competitive athlete, like how to push yourself, knowing what your body can really handle, also understanding rest and recovery, and that's an integral part of it too. It's not just go drive yourself into the ground. So I think those attributes certainly were helpful, and they are today. And I think what I developed through all that was a lot of grit, and just basically being able to withstand. And even now, especially being a CEO, quite frankly, the concept of grit is really that you can just withstand a lot of ongoing pain, suffering, challenge, problems for extended periods of time with little to no positive reinforcement.
Okay.
But with a singular kind of focus on the end goal, that gets you there. And I think that's either something that I don't know, who knows, born with or developed over time, but that certainly helped me look through crises or things you're dealing with and just say, well, where are we heading? Are we on track for that or not? And so you got to also be able to link that with being able to think 5 steps ahead and know where you're going. But certainly it's I've done 2 Ironmans, and one of them was one of the hardest ones ever put on. It was an Ironman Lake Tahoe in 2013, and it's considered one of the most difficult races ever because it had snowed the day before, and it was 27 degrees at Bike Out, and the swim was in Lake Tahoe and at 10,000 feet of climbing, and it was definitely a battle of attrition out there. But I was well prepared. I trained, I had a great coach, I did all the workouts, and I mentally knew I had done the work. And actually on the marathon, my fastest 4 miles were the last 4 miles. I felt really good about sort of executing that. And that's a lot like in your business life. You can, this challenge you got to go do. And did you prepare enough? And are you being smart along the way? And are you And there you got to fuel, you got to hydrate, you got to go think about your energy expenditure, you got to think about how to plan all the different phases of it. So I think for me, it's definitely integrated, and I feel off when I'm not. I feel like I'm a better CEO when I'm actually in better shape. So
You ready to do another Ironman?
I'm not doing a full one anytime soon, that's for sure. But I'm going to probably try to do a couple races this year, something shorter, and see where that goes. Ease my way back into it, but not possible at this moment.
So obviously, one has to determine how you spend your time. Again, whether it's training or just getting in your morning workout or giving your time to charitable causes. So you're part of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Foundation. So what made you decide to give your time to that organization?
Yeah, I'm a board trustee of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, which is the governing body for all Team USA athletics. I as a result of all my athletic background, I've been a huge fan of track and field and the Olympic Games in general. I remember I lived in LA at the time, and I watched the LA Olympics when I was a kid, and something I'd always wanted to get involved in. And I had an opportunity to do so a few years ago and really contribute philanthropically to them, but also contribute my time. And so one of the cool things is I'm part of this committee on the board. It's called the Performance and Innovation Committee. So you actually get exposure to like the technology that's being used for our athletes. And you actually get to meet the athletes that use it and talk about how that, and this is all coming from the donations of the foundation members, because I don't know if you know this, in the United States, there's zero funding for Olympic athletes from the government. It's all privately funded, zero. I mean, every other major developed country has its own program, right, to develop their athletes. So they rely on private donations, and the USOPC is just a tremendous organization that's allowed the donors' dollars to flow directly to the athletes.
Okay.
And so for the 28 Olympics, I'm going to get a little bit more involved on the track and field side, kind of as an ambassador to them from the USOC. So it's very exciting. Yeah, it's cool. So it's something that I'm really interested in. I'm very passionate about, and we have the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics coming up, starting in a few weeks, and I think Team USA is very well positioned there. So I've been getting all those updates as well. And I'll be probably going to a little bit of the Olympics for the first time. I've never been to Olympics, so
I love that.
I'm definitely going to do that. And then LA 28 for sure. I'm going to be all over it. So yeah, so I think it's important to have things that you're interested and passionate in that are outside of work. And I think it's been very rewarding, and I'm very blessed to get to be involved in the Olympic movement for the United States. And I think actually, final thing on that, I think LA 28, as we march towards it, I think these Olympic Games are always a moment that really does bring the world together. And I think as much tension as there is out there, and there's all kinds of, things that are always brewing, I really view that as an opportunity for the United States to reestablish itself through that lead up and then part of the games as a real welcoming host country.
Some of the soft power.
Exactly. And then have everybody come in and compete and recognize and reward the athletes, no matter where they came from or what country. Everybody's on a level playing field, and ultimately, show the world what the kind of leadership that the United States can show as a host country in 28. So it's been fun to be a part of that. Go Team USA.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so end on a topic that I know is dear to your heart, and that's fatherhood. So you were an executive and then became CEO of Marvell while raising 3 kids. So that isn't easy for either mom or dad.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about how you protected fatherhood, and maybe some of the things you think you did right, did wrong, and advice to others, because people go through this. Even if they're not leading a major company, they still have to make a lot of trade-offs and a lot of sacrifices.
Well, I think I had to make trade-offs. I think everybody does, raising kids. The stakes are not stakes, but the level of intensity might be different, right? Depending on the job you have. And I think it's important that, so for me, I really became an executive, and I was a public company executive when I took that sales vice president role at Maxim in 2006. So I've been a public company officer now and named executive officer for 20 years.
Okay.
So from 33 now to 53. So I've definitely been at it. That job required a lot of travel. So it required just tons of coordination, right? And the kids were young at the time. But I would do things like, and I've told this story at Marvell, there was a lot of discussion about like return to office and flexibility. And I just shared a story like Maxim, by the way, was like there's no remote work. And there's no 5 days, 5 days, you're in the office. That's what you do. But when I was a sales VP, I remember I had, part of my direct reports, a number of them were in Asia, because I was a global sales leader. So I would now I'd travel to visit them, but then every week I would do one-on-ones with all my direct reports. And so I set up a thing on Mondays where I would leave at 3:00 and I'd go home and I'd do a call from 3:30 to 4:30, 4:30 to 5:30. I do the China leader, the Korea leader. Then whatever at 5:30, I would just take a break, hang with the kids, give them a bath, help with dinner, do everything, and then get them to bed, and then do, I don't know, another call at 8 to 9 and 9 to 10 or something like that, and that was just one example.
Mm-hmm.
I never asked permission to leave at 3:00 that day. I never told my boss. I just did it, because I knew that was the right, I'm in charge of my time. I'm an adult. I'm a professional. This is a huge deal for my kids in terms of the touch point. I want to be there. And I just made that happen. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that, don't overthink this sometimes. If you know it's the right thing to do and you got to go bail and you got to go take care of something, I've been saying from day one at Marvell, take care of your family. Go see the soccer game. Don't take care of your parents, your spouse, your kids, whatever it takes, because you're no good to us if you're not in a good place, right? Family-wise. And even, with all the training, I remember training for this Ironman, and I would get up. I had a group of friends I was doing this with, so I had training partners. We would go for these long bike rides. On the build, you got to ride 80 to 100 miles every weekend, and then run afterwards. And I remember one time coming in, and we'd get up, so we'd be out on the bikes at 5:30, right? Lights on, cold. And I remember one time getting home, and all the kids had soccer games. It was just me in the house, and I come in from the ride, and I'm literally just laying on the hardwood floor, sweaty and just totally destroyed. And 5 minutes, and I'm okay, get up, shower off really quick, get over there. And you just do it. Mm-hmm. You just do it because that's what's important. So, I think it's the quality is really important, would be my experience. There's obviously the quantity in terms of how much time you can spend, but I think being engaged and present and being there for them. And so I'm really proud of how my kids all have turned out and how they've grown into young adults. And but it's something you just have to prioritize. You have to build that muscle, mm-hmm. and you cannot let the job, the corporate thing, just take you in, because it'll take you all the way, and then nobody cares in the end.
Right.
That you didn't take care of your health and you didn't take care of your family. Nobody knows that's going on. So I've really encouraged that from day one in this company, that people should take control of that. And because I want them to work here for a long time. So if you're going to work here for a long time, that means you're probably going to go get married and have kids, and you're going to have parents that are going to get sick. And there's all kinds of stuff that's going to happen to you. And so you have to have that built into your lifestyle, that time and that space and that agency to go make sure you take care of it. You got to take care of it. And I think if you really take care of it, and it's noticed, and then it's not so much, well, I missed, I was gone for a week, or I traveled a lot. Right. I mean, my dad traveled a ton. He was a sales leader, but he, I don't remember that he wasn't around. Right. I just remember all the times I was with him. So.
And the fact that your kids as adults want to hang out with you, it shows that you did something right.
Seems for
right
now. Yeah, for now. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a great note to end it on.
Yeah.
And we're going to do the tape out, the what I call the last tape out, which is rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay, and you can just whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
Top of your top of your head. So best advice you ignored and later realized it was right.
Well, I had to learn patience, and I think you're told. I know it's kind of rapid fire, but just real quick, like you're always told that you're supposed to push for your promotion, advocate. If you don't, you're not going to get. You're not advocating for yourself. You're not going to get the compensation you should or the title you should, and that's what people will tell you. And then, and my dad actually always had great advice on this. He was like, hey, do a great job in the job you have. And that is what's going to get you promoted, not asking for it. Mm-hmm. And I think it took me a while to internalize that. And he also said, because at some point, if your career is growing at a high rate, you're always going to be behind. You're like, if you're getting promoted every couple of years, you'll never quite be the same pay as somebody that's been doing that job for 5 or 6 years, because you just got that job. You might be 10 years younger than them. So you're going to be behind, but you're not actually behind. And then related to that was, and it always takes the management longer to figure out how good a job you're doing. And I think he gave me that advice consistently, and it took me a while to get my patience level down.
Right. I think that's great advice for young people, because
I pass it to everybody now. I know.
Unbelievable obsession with, but I've been here for 2 years.
Right.
Or whatever their friends and their peers say that it's time to be promoted. So
exactly. Great, and I look at, what have they accomplished?
Right.
If their heads down doing a great, and I think the other thing you don't realize is that the management is watching. Like, I'm watching all these people. I want them to do well. That's my bias. But then sometimes they think that they're doing a better job than they're doing. Mm-hmm. And they're sort of indignant that they didn't get this promotion. And it's like, no, I want you to, but you're not ready. And most people aren't ready to deal with that, because unfortunately they don't have mentors. They don't have people that, so I try to pass it on, but it's human nature, especially in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. It's just very impatient, but I had the same impatience.
Right.
So I understand. Yeah.
Okay. If you could download one human quality into AI, empathy, resilience, or humility, which would you choose?
Empathy.
Okay. You lead with empathy. So, quote, mantra, or philosophy you live by?
I mean, I don't know if I live by, but I like the one we talked about earlier, which is do the right thing when no one's looking.
Okay. A failure that you're now grateful for?
Well, I did I led an acquisition when I was at Maxim, and it was a public company acquisition, and it didn't perform well. Didn't perform to the deal model. There was a series of issues on why that was, but it didn't. And it was a failure from that standpoint. Now, I knew there was risk. I was very young when I did this, and I was probably 40 or something. So it was the first thing I was sort of in charge of it. I was leading it. And so on paper, it didn't look like a very good deal. But the reason I was so strongly wanted to do it was the technology was something we didn't have, and we were not going to be able to get there on our own. And the people that we were going to get were people that we needed that we could not get otherwise. And so I had to take the heat, because it was not good. And I sort of felt terrible about it. Am I going to get fired over this? I mean, I just blew it. We spent all this money. Now the revenue's not performing. It was pretty bad. But I think the thing I'm grateful for is, one, it turned out that technology that Maxim got was actually a huge part of the valuation that ADI paid for it. That they saw that was very valuable to them. So there was value, 10 years later, which is interesting. We ended up getting great leadership in. Guy ran a whole business unit. Guy became the CTO of the company. He came from that. And for me, I got to go through an M&A that actually failed and see what that looked like. So I learned so much from that.
Right.
And it wasn't devastating to Maxim. It wasn't big enough to like bring in. It was just unfortunate. But I learned so much from that one. So in some ways, our track record on M&A has been pretty good. And some of that was born out of a lot of the lessons I learned from that one. So sometimes you can look on paper and say, well, the thing was, if it didn't perform to what you thought it was. But sometimes the intangibles are actually pretty important. So I'm very grateful I had that opportunity, because M&A has been a big part of what we did here. And if I hadn't burnt the first pancake, the first pancake, sometimes it gets still burnt the second one. I kind of burnt the first pancake on that one.
So you, if nothing else, learning from your failure is
I learned so much on what not to do.
Okay.
What not to do.
So if you weren't doing this job, what would you be doing?
I would probably be, I don't know. I'd probably be more, outside of work. I mean, if I wasn't in this job, I would love to stay involved in the business community and help start up. I'm at a point where I would love to help other people, help young founders, help other companies, management teams, do another board, that kind of thing. But I am passionate about sport. I really am. And so I think I would probably dive more into some of these different opportunities with either Team USA or triathlon community, or I just think that's something I'm just very, very passionate about. And I don't know, there's all kinds of things you can do. I almost don't even know. I've been so tunnel vision on what I'm doing. But I haven't been bored since about the second grade. So I can tell you that. I don't get bored.
Yeah. So where's your favorite place to eat in Silicon Valley?
I would say go-to is Andale in Los Gatos.
Okay.
It's my favorite Mexican food place. Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that one
out. Yeah, check it out.
Where's your favorite vacation spot?
It's a good question. I like to travel quite a bit, but I think if I just had to pick one just as like a pure vacation, it would be Hawaii.
Okay.
Probably Maui.
So you love the beach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would surprise us about what's on your playlist?
I mean, I grew up when I was in the Bay Area. There's a radio station that was here for a long time called Live 105, which was alt rock, basically, alternative rock. So that still ends up in the playlist, stuff from the 80s and 90s. But I have a very broad range. I really love music. I love going to concerts. And the range is quite wide at this point, so I don't really get too pinned down.
What's the last concert you went to?
Went to Chris Stapleton over the summer.
I love Chris Stapleton.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was phenomenal.
Okay. He's going to be in Big Sky this summer.
He was phenomenal. But I also saw Social Distortion. So that's a different, right?
Okay.
In LA a few months ago. So a range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one last question that I've asked a few people: if you had to be 20 years old all over again, do you want to be 20 years old when you grew up, or today?
I don't know that it's hard to say. I mean, I'm very nostalgic, I guess. So I had a great time in my 20s. I think maybe that's situational how people answer this question. But I think both. It's just two completely different eras and times. There was something very special about not having a cell phone back then,
Right.
and
No proof that we did anything.
Yeah. And somehow we got it all done. I was very adventurous and all over the place and taking trips and doing things and hanging out with friends and very, very creative. And you didn't need all the technology to do it, as it turns out. But I think we're just on this really interesting forefront of where the generation today that's 20, what they have in front of them, I think has just got so much opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think sometimes it's overblown how great it was back in the old days, But I really enjoyed my 20s quite a bit. It was very magical, being out here in Silicon Valley and being part of that sort of history and having that as part of my background is really, I feel so blessed, to have been part of it. But I think people that are in their early 20s, not that Silicon Valley has to be everybody's thing, but certainly if you're in the business world and in technology, this is still the place to be. Mm-hmm. And so I think the current generation has an equally unique opportunity. really go make an impact.
Okay. Well, this was fun.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi.
And I think that hopefully the audience takes away that, behind the title of CEO is a guy just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jodi. Appreciate it.